Hi fun friends. Alright, so the purpose of this video is to create a Gantt chart for a project that I'm managing and to build that all in R. So I am going to go ahead and just jump in and get started. To begin, I'm going to load the library, the packages that I need. So all of these packages I have already installed. They're on my computer. So I'm just going to use the library function and name the packages Plotly, ReadXL, and ggplot2 because I need all of these. And then I'm also going to load my data at the same time, and this is a location on my personal computer. And I am using the ReadXL function to push that to an object that I'm calling Gantt, which is going to be the data for my Gantt chart. So I just get started and go ahead and run this. Oops. And run that. And so now I have my data here. It's 19 observations of 10 variables. Perfect. So a couple things that I need to do here before I get started. I have a start date, and I also have another start date here, which doesn't look right at all. I feel like that has been converted, but I'm just going to go ahead and carry on. So I'm going to I want to make sure that both of these variables are being recognized by R as a date. So in order to do that, I'm going to first call the variable. So this is my data frame. The $sign indicates which variable of my data frame I'm looking for. Sorry for the dogs. And I want the start. And I want the function that I'm going to use is, so I'm basically just using the same variable as the first argument of the function as date, which instead of being a character string, it will recognize, R will recognize this as the data type as a date. So, and I'm just going to save it right back to the same variable. And then the second argument of this is the format argument with the equal sign. And what this is the parenthesis sign with the indicator of what each variable is in the year, comma, month, dash day. So that's just how the date is formatted. And then I'm also doing that for the new start date, which is just the exact same thing. So I'm going to go ahead and run these so that I can make and see now the new start date and the start date have been changed. And you see the format here for my start date disappeared, and I'm just going to roll with it. That was unfortunate, but it did have a new start date on there. That anyway, we're just going to move on. So next is I'm just going to use the client argument. This is just I'm just creating an object called client, and it has a categorical or string title, just string name. It's called syntax job analysis. And so you see here, it's not really an object, it's just a value. So client is a thing that has a value of this string. Okay. So the next part of what I need to do is that I want to pick a palette to use with my Gantt chart. And because our color brewer, which is the package that I'm going to use, has kind of continuous and discrete color values. It is very important to go ahead and set these. For a Gantt chart, I would want discrete colors and not colors that were continuous or like gradients, because that will help the bars really stand out from each other. So in order to do that, I'm just going to create an object here called COLS. I'm pretending that's short for colors if I was really lazy. And then I'm just going to directly load the color brewer package and use the function brewer.pow to create a vector. So this first part is the package. These two hyphens just mean that I'm just using the package for this one function, kind of. Here, the first argument of the brewer.pow function is usually a value or a vector. And so that's what this is. I'm creating a vector length that is the unique values of this variable, resources. So my resources variable is here. There, and then the second argument that I want for the brewer.pow is the name of the palette, and here I'm using set3. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and then I have a vector of from 1 to 4 with 4 color values now, and that is saved in an object called CLOS, short for colors. Okay, then the other thing that I want to do is I want to add a variable to my data frame, and I'm going to call it Gantt color. It's going to be a color. This is what I'm naming it, and what I'm pushing to it is I'm factoring this resource variable, and then the labels of the resource variable will be the object of colors with this object that I made. So this is very interesting. I'm going to go ahead and run this, and so now I have this color. I'm just going to open up the data to see this. So now I have this color variable, and it's factored out so that the name of the resource is now the name of the color here indicated in this column. So that's what the factor does. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm just going to create an empty plot. And I'm going to save that plotly plot to the object P, and by using the plot bottom/ly function, which I think is cute. So I've created an empty plot. You see my value, my P here, and it's a list of 8 variables. And then I'm just going to run P just so we can take a look at what an empty plotly plot looks like. And here we are. Next, I am going to create a loop that creates the bars of the tasks. And at the same time, I'm also going to create a hover text, and let me go through those things one by one. So this first line right here, this creates the loop. What I want is for I can be, it's an index, and I'm indexing, making my loop in 1, 2, which is like this. So 1 to a range of things, right? Should be like a vector, and I want it to go for the number of rows that there are. No, Ruby. I'm sorry, that was my dog. For the number of rows that there are in the Gantt table, which is 19. 19 observations. -1. And so the purpose of the -1 is because there is a title row. So this would give us a row for each row in the Gantt chart. Then everything that runs in the braces, which are here and in here, all of this is going to be part of the loop. And it's just going to add a trace. I'm sorry, my animals are barking in the background. So it's going to run a loop, and each time it runs it, it's going to take one off, remove one variable until there are none left, and so it gets down to the last variable or row, and that's how it creates a bar for each of the tasks. So to do that, I am now using my same P plot, and I'm going to push into it the add trace function, which has a lot of possible arguments. So for starters, I'm going to call the P argument. It's going to be the first object, which seems kind of redundant, but that's what we're going with. So I'm basically making a new P from this P from this plot right here. I want the X axis down here to be, so it's going to be a range from the start to, then the second value is, here's the comma, is the start plus the duration. So however long the duration was is going to be, and they'll start from x0 and x1 and it'll go across. And then y is just going to be the I here, which is the rows or the task, and we'll start from over here. And here is the little concatenated argument there for the y values. Next, the mode that I'm going to use here is just called lines. This is just an argument that adds a characteristic to my table. Specifically, I want to format those lines, so I'm going to use the argument line to create the color and a width of 20, which is the width of the bars. And then the color is just going to be unique for the index, that it's running. For the purposes of this chart, I'm not going to show a legend. The legend does plot show a legend item for each trace, and technically there are 19 traces that we're creating in this plot due to this loop, and it's not very meaningful. Instead, I am going to use some hover info, and it is going to equal the object text that I'm going to create now. So for text, to create this object, I'm going to paste, use the function paste, and then everything that is within this function is what it is going to paste. And so I want everything that's in quotations is what the hover info will print into the hover box, so to speak, a little box that will appear when you hover over a bar, and then the value will be the variable that is outlined here. So for task, it'll say task and then be the variable task for each iteration that it goes through for this loop. And then the same thing goes for responsible would be the resources, start date would be start, duration would be duration, sorry about that, phase for the phase. I truly apologize for my dogs. Phase for the variable phase will show up for phase, description for deliverable, and the status, whether or not it's completed, and then the actual start date, which I now know is not going to show up because it didn't format, and the actual duration, which is the new duration. And then also, this is just an interesting point to make. There is another set of quotation marks here, and this just makes a new line. It's pretty specific, and this spacing right from here to here is actually pretty important, and that will get it to line up. And then last, I'm going to use another argument. It's called evaluate, and I'm going to set this to true, and this avoids lazy loading, because by default R will delay doing work until the very last minute, and this will put the everything into memory right away instead of waiting until it needs it. So I'm going to go ahead and run all these things, and it runs the whole loop and add trace at one time, and then we'll take a look to see what that looks like. And so here we are. So now I have the dates going across on the bottom, and then these task numbers up here. We have 19 tasks, and then the discrete colors for each of the tasks, and they are grouped by the person that is responsible for the task. So, and then when you hover over these, you can see that it has all of the information that we put over here in the hover info in this create text. So now I want to add some more information to this chart, as well as clean it up to make it more presentable. And I'm going to use that by pushing the argument or the function layout into the plot. So I'm going to use the plot is what the data frame or the reference that I'm using here, and pushing it back into plot. So it's the same plot, the same plotly object. This I'm just adding to it kind of. This one is specifically to edit the layout, is what this argument does. So here I have my next arguments are the X and Y axis, and both of these functions use a list. Both of these arguments use a list function that just contains all of the details or parameters, so to speak, for the x-axis. For example, it uses a parameter here. This is show grid. I'm not really sure you would call these parameters, but or an argument of an argument. I'm sure it has a name that I'm just not aware of, but argument of argument kind of works. So I don't want to show these grid lines. The title of the x-axis, I want to be the expected duration. It's here in quotation marks. Then the tick font here is going to be a list of the color, and in this color. And then the y-axis, I also don't want it to show the grid. The title here is going to be tasks, and the tick font is also going to be in this color. The tick mode is an array, which is kind of which will call all of the elements that for the y-axis, and then specifically the tick values will be from 1 to, this is a vector, and the value is going to be from 1 to the number of rows in Gantt. So 1 through 19. Now the tick text specifically is going to be the unique names of the tasks of the Gantt chart. Okay. So in sum, I'm removing the grids, putting up in titles for the X and Y axes, changing the color of these tick marks for the X-axis and the Y-axis, but then also changing the text here on the Y-axis to the name of the tasks. And then the domain is a location for where I want the text to start. Following that, I'm going to add some annotations because I couldn't add, or I chose not to add the legend because I did not find it to be very useful, and it is easier to create an annotation. It is another list that takes multiple arguments. In this case, I'm using 2 list arguments for my list function. And each of those has an X reference and a Y reference, then the value of X and Y, the text that I'm going to paste in there, and then just some information about the font, the color, the size, where on the plot I want those to be, and how I want those to be aligned. Okay, so the first annotation is going to be kind of a makeshift easy type legend that will be down in the bottom right hand corner. I'm using this argument paper for the XREF, and what this means is it positions it's like the distance from kind of like the X or the Y. It has another argument. It could be like X domain or X2 domain. And it just refers to the position between, like the left and right axes. So for both of these, I'm going to use the argument paper or the value paper. And then specifically, so when this is set to paper, the position is the distance from the left of the plotting area. So from down here, where so it's like 0 and 1. I can't show you because my tooltip comes up, and then Y ref would be opposite. It would be 1, 0, and then I can customize those and give it actual value for X and Y, and this is going to be where my pasted text shows up. So I want to make a note right here that I tried for some time to have R calculate the number of tasks completed, tasks underway, and tasks yet to be starting using multiple formulations. This right here is just one that I tried, but it wasn't accepting it. And for the purposes of this assignment, I did give up. And I am just having it calculate, print, and show the value that is completed over the number of lines in the project chart, because I was running out of time. So I tried multiple things and I really just needed to finish at this point. So that was a bit of a disappointment on my part, but we have to move on. Then the font that I want for the text is also going to be contained in a list. This is the color that I'm using. These are hex values of colors. In size, I want to be font 13. Specifically, I want this text to be AX and AY are both going to equal 0, and then those are going to align to the left. Next, I'm going to use the same type of list. So this is like the second list argument of the list function. And now I'm going to use the exact same things, but I'm going to create a title. And I'm using the same arguments or reference here for paper. These also help with sizing when you're moving your window and display around. But this time I want the location to be up here, kind of on the top. So I'm going to use 0.1 and y equals 1. And then I'm going to anchor it to the left. The X anchor would be to the left. Next, I'm going to use the text and the paste O have the two arguments. The first one will be like the printed project Gantt chart, and then I'm finally using that object that I made over here, client, and it's just going to paste what the value is of client in there. And then additionally, I'm just going to list out the parameters of this title, being the color, the size 20, the family of fonts is New Times Roman. All of those will be contained within a list. Then back to the AX and AY, both equal to 0, and this will align to the left. All of these get contained, like I said, into this giant list. And then I have a couple more arguments that I'm going to use for my layout, which is the background plot color. I'm using this value, and also the paper color. So, the plot is this area right here. That is the plot, but then the paper is what the plot is on. So those are going to be the same color. So I'm going to go ahead and run this. Oh wait, did it run? Perfect. And then, so it has run, and then I'm just going to run P, and my table here will change. So, okay. So now what I have is, here is this number of tasks completed, number of tasks underway, number of tasks yes to start. The dates, here are my new, if you may, let's see if you can tell that the shading, because I changed the colors of these tick marks, these were like of a default color, but here I changed them. They're just a little bit lighter, more of a charcoal, as well as the title for the axes. The project Gantt chart you see is in New Times Roman, so this is the title that I use from the object client. And then all of the tick marks here on the left, on the y-axis, were changed to the title or the name of the task. And then another feature of this is you can just zoom in to see what's going on kind of more up close, really, and get really down into it. So great. Thank you. And I don't know how to get back to where I was. Perfect. Thank you for taking this time with me.